In the last lecture, we stopped in this slide number 27. So we'll go probably start from the 28. Okay. This is Sarkla and SARA Suburban Amendments and Reauthorization Act. Following nearly 2 years of debate, SARA was passed in the final days of 99 Congress in 86. SARA created an 8.5 billion fund for cleanup, abandoned waste disposal site, and additional 500 million for the cleanup. So SARA increased EPA's flexibility to perform removal actions require attainment of applicable or relevant and appropriate requirements, errors at the federal level for more stringent state standards, and established a preference for permanent remedies that reduce the volume, toxicity, mobility of hazardous substance, selecting remedies for Superfund sites. So these are the reason we did that. After Bhopal incident strategy in India, the community right to know the titles 3 EPCRA provisions of SARA require industries to plan an emergency and inform the public of hazardous substance being used. Bhopal's tragedy was caused by hazardous material, not by hazardous waste. Bhopal tragedy in India, Union Carbide India Limited, a pesticide plant, happened at 1 a.m. Sunday, December 3rd of 1984. About 45 tons of methyl isoniazide leaked from a storage tank. 3,000 people died and 200,000 people got injured from that. So that was the part of this. So here is the picture, shows what happened in there, the carbide industry in there, Bhopal, Union Carbide's long closed pesticide plant in Bhopal. So SARA required that the hazardous ranking system that determines which sites are eligible for cleanup funding be totally revised. Pursuant to SARA, the EPA initiated remedial investigation or feasibility studies at 650 sites and remedial actions at 375 sites within 5 years. So okay, identification of hazardous waste. In order to identify the hazardous waste, there are 4 questions that we can ask. I think I have a flowchart also. Then we can answer and create the flowchart and go from there. Is the material in question is solid waste? So we already know the definition of solid waste. It has to be by definition a solid waste. Is the material excluded from the definition of solid waste or hazardous waste? The exclusion. Is the waste a listed or characteristic hazardous waste? Is the waste delisted? So we don't know like listed and characteristic hazardous waste yet. We'll learn more on that. So, but at least we know these 4 questions. If we ask the 4 questions, then based on the answers, we should be able to identify whether a waste, solid waste, is a hazardous waste or not. Here is the flowchart. The first question, if it is no, then it is not a hazardous waste. If it is yes, then go to the second question. So the second question, is the material excluded from the definition of solid waste or hazardous waste? If it is yes, then it is not hazardous waste or is not subject to subtitle C regulation. If it is no, then go to the third questions. If it is listed or characteristic hazardous waste, if it is no, then it is not part of the subtitle C regulation. If it is yes, then the last question. If it is delisted, delisted means that it was in the list before, but now based on the information, new information, it has taken out of the list. So if it is delisted, then it is not. If it is not delisted, then definitely it is the waste subject to RCRA subtitle C regulation. Subtitle C means hazardous waste. So this is the flowchart we can use to identify a hazardous waste. Okay, then the exclusions. A material cannot be a hazardous waste if it does not meet the definition of solid waste. Thus, wastes that are excluded from the definition of solid waste are not subject to RCRA subtitle C hazardous waste regulation. There are 19 exclusions from the definition. So these are the ones, basically domestic sewage and mixed domestic sewage, industrial wastewater discharge, irrigation return flows, radioactive waste. Radioactive waste may not be hazardous waste, but they have a separate category. In situ mining waste, pulping liquor, spent sulfuric acid, closed loop recycling, spent wood preservatives, cook byproduct waste, splash condenser dross residue. So, and hazardous oil bearing secondary material and reserve oil, condensate of craft mill stream stripers, comparable fuel, processed scrap metal, shredded circuit boards, mineral processing spent materials, petrochemical, recovered oil, and spent casting solutions from petroleum refining. So these are the 19 hazardous waste. They are excluded. They are exclusions from the hazardous waste. So the exemptions. Exemptions are the EPA also exempts certain solid waste from the definition of hazardous waste. So if a material meets an exemption from the definition of hazardous waste, that means it is a solid waste, but it doesn't meet the requirement of the what is called the hazardous waste. It can be hazardous waste. It cannot be hazardous waste, even if the material technically meets the list or exhibits a characteristic. There are 17 exemptions. In this case, household hazardous waste, agricultural waste, mining overburden, bandstand, oil, gas and thermal explosion development and production waste, and WAVIL, the fossil fuel combustion waste, mining and mineral processing waste, and cement kiln dust waste. So these are the one is not part of the hazardous waste. They are exempted. So trivalent chromium, arsenically treated wood that most of the time people use in there, petroleum contaminated media and debris from underground storage tanks, spent chlorofluorocarbon refrigerants, used oil filters, used oil distillation bottoms, landfill leachate or gas condensate, then project Excel pilot project exclusions, raw material product storage, process unit waste exclusions, sample and treatability study exclusions, waste characterization samples, treatability study samples, and garage material exclusions. So these are 13 exemptions. Okay, types of hazardous waste. There are two types of hazardous waste. One is called listed hazardous waste, other one is called characteristics hazardous waste. Listed hazardous waste, there are 4 lists of that. They call it F list, P list, K list, and U list. So we'll discuss all of those lists. So how a list can be in the list criteria, what kind of criteria waste has to follow or meet the requirement to be in the list. There are 3 different criteria EPA uses to decide whether or not a waste is a hazardous waste. 3 criteria are, so it has to be typically contain toxic chemicals at levels that could pose a threat to human health and the environment if improperly managed. Such waste are known as toxic listed waste. The wastes are contain such dangerous chemicals that could pose threat to human health and the environment even when properly managed. These wastes are fatal to humans and animals even in low doses. Such wastes are known as acute hazardous waste. So the waste typically exhibits one of 4 characteristics of hazardous waste: ignitability, corrosivity, reactivity, and toxicity. So these are the 3 criteria for a waste to be in the list. So constituents of listed hazardous waste. So it basically is defined in section 261 of things like that. Each listed waste is assigned one or more of these hazardous codes. I is the ignitable, C is corrosive, R is reactive, E is toxicity characteristics, H is acute hazardous, T is toxic. Here is the definition of acutely hazardous. A waste has been shown to be fatal to humans in low doses. EPA uses toxicity information from the literature to decide which wastes are acutely hazardous. So there are more codes on that is codes for hazardous waste under RCRA. So cost type ignitable, waste type ignitable, EPA number is D001, EPA code is I, corrosive D002, code is C, reactive D003, code is R, toxicity characteristics could be D004 to D043, that is E, toxic is F, K, and U list is T, acutely hazardous F and P list is H. Okay, all of those are from 40 CFR Part 261. So toxic, EPA list of a waste as toxic if it contains certain hazardous constituents, and EPA judges that the waste could pose health or environmental problems according to certain criteria, including chronic toxicity, migration potential, bioaccumulation, quantities of waste generated, and waste environmental problems caused by mismanagement of the waste. So types of hazardous waste continue. This is the F list. F list is there are 28 of those. They are from also known as the waste from non-specific source. Okay, that means we don't know where it's coming from. Non-specific source. 40 CFR section 261 subsection 31. F list waste can be divided into 7 groups depending on the type of manufacturing or industrial operation that creates them. Spent solvent waste, codes are F001 to F005, electroplating and other metal finishing from 006 to 12 and 19, dioxin bearing waste 20 to 23 and 26 to 28, then chlorinated aliphatic hydrocarbons production waste F24 to 25, wood preservative waste F32 to 34 and 35. So, and the petroleum refinery waste treatment sludge 37 to 38, and multi-source leachate is 39 F039. So these are the one. So these are the F list. The K list is from specific sector of industry. That means it's known. It's from 3240 CFR section 261.32. There are 13 of those. The wood preservation, organic chemical manufacturing, then pesticide manufacturing, petroleum refining, and veterinary pharmaceutical manufacturing, inorganic pigment, inorganic chemicals, explosive manufacturing, iron and steel production, primary aluminum production, secondary lead processing, ink formulation, caulking. So processing of coal to produce coke, and material used in iron and steel production. So these are the one K listed. So P and U list, discarded commercial chemical products. P and U list designated as hazardous waste, pure and commercial grade formulation of certain unused chemicals. One kind of example would be some unused chemicals are spilled by accident. Others are intentionally discarded because they are off specification and cannot serve the purpose for which they were originally produced. For a waste to qualify as P list, it has to be acutely hazardous, means it could be 40 CFR section 261.33E. Then U list is hazardous waste, that is 40 CFR 261.33.3F. The waste must meet the following 3 criteria to be in the P and U list. So the first criteria is like, say, waste must contain one of the chemicals listed on the P and U list. Number 2, the chemical in the waste must be unused. And number 3 is the chemical in the waste must be in the form of commercial chemical product, CCP. Now I think I have a definition of CCP here. Here is the meaning of CCP. 100% pure is a technical grade and the sole active ingredient in a chemical formulation. So if it meets these 3 requirements, then this would be considered as a CCP. Okay, notes on P and U codes. The listing includes only those products and intermediates which are being discarded either in their pure form or contained in a mixture as the sole active ingredient. Processed waste, which merely contain any of the P and U chemicals, even in high concentrations, are not hazardous waste by this listing mechanism. In addition, products that contain more than one active ingredient listed in PU codes are not hazardous waste by this listing. So we are going to stop here for this one. This is the second lecture. Then from the slide number 53, we'll start the third lecture.